So let's start. Let me first of it introduce myself. My name is Albert Sagues. I'm the head of tax at RSM, and I wanted to welcome you all to this webinar regarding the new aspects on invoicing in Spain and the impacts on VeriFactu that will be in force next 1st January 2026. Today, we are going to be talking mainly about the following topics. Next, please. So we are going to be talking about what are those changes coming up on next 1st January 2026, because it's going to be important to understand that we are not dealing with electronic invoicing itself, but a new regulation on invoicing software. So we are talking about the tools that companies, that entities will be using to issue their invoices and the new regulations that will be applicable starting 1st January. Then we are going to be talking about the scope of those changes. What kind of companies are going to be affected by those changes? Because, and let me anticipate what my colleague would be explaining in the next few minutes, not all entities in Spain would be affected by these new regulations. Only small and medium companies, defined as any company that has a turnover under 6 million euros would be affected by this VeriFactu, or these new invoicing regulations set by this royal decree that we are going to be reviewing on the main aspects, the most important ones, defining also what's going to be what we call VeriFactu and no VeriFactu. So let me also say that we do all know those new regulations as VeriFactu, but in order to say it in a more accurate way, we should be talking about the new regulations regarding invoicing software, not simply VeriFactu. VeriFactu means that a company would be reporting its invoicing in an automated way within 60 seconds after the issuance of the invoice, or not VeriFactu, that would be using a certified software but not doing any kind of reporting. We are going to be also reviewing the existing right now obligations in terms of immediate reporting of information, what we call SII, which is also right now in force, and the operational scheme for the invoicing process. We will finalize with the frequently asked questions. We are going to be reviewing the most asked questions by taxpayers, and then we will open, the webinar to your own questions, trying to get or give you some answers to your points. Next, please. In all cases, we have added to the presentation, you are going to be receiving a copy after the webinar, the key persons to refer to, just in case you need some assistance in Spain regarding those new invoicing regulations. In Barcelona, Jaime Lopez and Sergio Garcia and myself. In Valencia, Raúl Morset and Pepe Oltra. And then in our other offices, we do also have, next please, David Jiménez, Igor Martín, and Vicente Durán in Madrid, José Antonio Romero in Seville, and in the Canary Islands, Eduardo Sánchez and Javier Betancourt. Eduardo Sánchez will be with me in this presentation, talking about the main aspects of those new regulations. Just to make a little bit of history on those new changes, we have to recall what happened back in 2017, when the Spanish tax authorities launched the immediate reporting information. That means the SII, the immediate submission of information, means that since 2017, big entities, defining big entities that are invoicing more than 6 million euros in a calendar year, fall in this obligation of providing this information, this invoicing information, sales and purchases, within 4 days, 4 labor days, after the invoices were registered. So right now in Spain, there are many companies, big ones, that are quite used to do such reporting, the SII. What happened right now in what's going to happen in 2026? New regulations set by the Spanish tax authorities said that the rest of the taxpayers, so taxpayers under 6 million euros, will fall on a new invoicing obligation, which is the use of a certified software. And this is applicable, as I was saying, for small companies under 6 million euros. This is quite important because, as you can see, we are grouping companies according to their size. Big entities under the SII since 2017, and small and medium companies, and even self-employed persons, what we call in Spain autonomous physical persons, will fall starting on 2026 on the use of certified software and under the obligation to issue invoices in a special way, adding a QR code, a hash, etc. But none of them, nor 2017 and 2026, is really an electronic invoicing. Electronic invoicing has already been approved, but the development has not taken place yet. We are expecting to see electronic invoicing around 2028, what we will call factura electrónica or factura E. But right now, this is something which is not in place. So right now, we are facing in 2026 the changes on the invoicing software. And as I was saying, I give the word to Eduardo, my partner, that will be explaining more in detail what those new regulations are talking about. Eduardo, please.
Thank you, Albert. Yes, once Albert have already provided us with a little bit of background of where we are now, first of all, what we need to know is whether or not this royal decree that governs, that rules, all the obligations regarding the new invoicing requirements will affect or not to you. The first question is whether I am registered or not in the SII. If I'm registered in the SII, this decree doesn't affect me, so nothing changed for you. On the other hand, if you are not registered in the SII, the next question will be, I'm using an invoicing software? If the answer to this question is no, then this royal decree and the rules that govern that royal decree doesn't affect you neither. So, but if the question is yes, then I need to figure out whether these regulations will affect me depending on what type of taxpayers I am. This will affect to taxpayers subject to Spanish corporate income tax, and also to non-resident taxpayers subject to Spanish non-resident income tax with a permanent establishment in Spain. In this case, these new regulations will affect you from the 1st of January 2026. On the other hand, if you are an individual taxpayer subject to a personal income tax and you are carrying out a business activity, you will be also under the scope of this new legislation. But in this case, this will affect you from the 1st of July 2026. Well, this royal decree applies and develops a new requirements for the electronic invoicing. This electronic invoicing will be based on the fact that you will need to use a new type of software that complies with the conditions that the royal decree foresees. For example, all the invoices must include a QR code and also a hash. That will, as you know, is a unique digital fingerprint. Well, as Albert has said before, there's a little bit of confusion between about what the people refers to how the people refers to this new new law or this new regulation. That is, everyone calls it VeriFactu, but not everyone under this regulation, affected by this regulation, will be using or applying VeriFactu. The VeriFactu is one of the options that you have under this law. If you want to opt for the VeriFactu, then that will imply that you will submit the invoices issued by you almost simultaneously to Spanish tax authorities. On the other hand, if you don't opt for the VeriFactu, then there will be no immediate submission of the invoices to the tax authorities, but in turn, your software, you need to comply with certain conditions based on the obligation that you have, that you will have the obligation of keep those invoices ready to the fact that tax authorities may request you to send them to carry out the tax inspections or any other comproval that they would like to do. It is important to point out that this royal decree doesn't change any invoicing obligation that was already in place sorry, here in Spain. Also, we will see it is important. It's an important penalty regime for this for those that do not comply with the conditions foreseen in the royal decree. For example, as you see here, 50,000 euros per financial year will be applicable if the computer systems are not in accordance with for what is in the regulation stated. Well, once we know that if we are under this royal decree and that we can opt for the VeriFactu or not VeriFactu, let's see what are the difference between, let's say, these two systems. In the case of VeriFactu, the billing records are automatically sent to tax authorities, right? It fulfills by default the tax regulations and assists the tax authorities in order to review without the need of prior request. That means that communications that tax authorities in principle may carry out to the taxpayers will be reduced in those cases where the taxpayer has already sent these invoices throughout the VeriFactu. These invoices can be also directly verified by the clients in the website of the Spanish tax authorities. As I have said before, in principle, there will be a lower level of obligations since the tax authorities have everything on their side. So less tax summons should be in principle raised regarding these taxpayers, in the case of these taxpayers. In principle, what tax authorities are also saying is that as they will have this information, they will provide to the taxpayers with additional information that can help the taxpayers to correctly fulfill and carry out all the forms or all the assessments regarding the different taxes that they have to carry out. And in principle, it seems, or they are defending, that will be reduced the administrative cost of the taxpayers regarding the preparation of the tax returns. Also, there's the possibility to track the invoices received from the suppliers that have also decided to use the VeriFactu. If we are in a situation where no VeriFactu is applied, all the invoices have been recorded and stored by the company, by the taxpayer. Of this, the compliance, the software should be in comply with what is the conditions stated in the regulation. So in case the tax authorities knock you at the door, you need to be able to prove that your software is in compliance with this new regulation. Invoices are only verifiable at the company's headquarters. It implies an additional obligations at the software level in order to ensure that these invoices cannot be altered and that we need to keep the integrity of this information. Of course, you need to ensure that you will be able to access all this information, all these invoices for at least between 4 and 6 years, right? That you will not have access to these services that tax authorities in principle will provide to the taxpayers that are under the VeriFactu. And of course, you may face some problems if you have any accidental loss of the data that may imply a breach in the storage obligation. Well, as Albert had said before, companies that are under the SII are not obliged to apply the regulations foreseen in this royal decree. So one of the ways of not applying, let's call it VeriFactu, is to apply voluntarily the SII. So let's see. What are the differences between the electronic invoicing system and the SII? The SII applies only to taxpayers that have a turnover of more than 6 million euros. Also, to those taxpayers that have elected to apply the monthly VAT refund, the so-called REDEME, and also VAT groups. So, if for any reason that you want to do you want not to apply the VeriFactu because you are willing to be in the SII, well, assuming that you're a company of less than 6 million euros, that you are not at this stage within the scope of the SII, you will elect the application of this so-called regime of submission of invoices to tax authorities. Automatically, you will be in the monthly VAT liquidation. So you will be not filing the VAT returns on a quarterly basis, but on a monthly basis. That will be, in principle, the main impact for a company of less than 6 million euros turnover for applying the SII in order to avoid the application of the electronic invoicing system regulations, right? What information must be sent to tax authorities? Well, in the case of VeriFactu, the essential data of the invoices issued, but in the case of SII, the record of books of invoices issued and received. How is the information sent? Well, the electronic invoicing system using a software authorized by the tax authorities, or also tax authorities are saying that they will implement a tool throughout their website. So small taxpayers with a little amount of invoices can also use this tool. In the case of SII, the company submits the invoices throughout its own resources in XML format or manually records throughout the virtual office or of Spanish tax authorities. When VeriFactu is immediately, as we have said, but in the case of SII, that will be within the 4 days counted from the date of issuance of the invoice, or in the case of invoice received, the 4 days from the day that they were recorded in the accounting system. Verification, well, this is confirmed by tax authorities, or in the case of SII, it's only verifiable if the counterparty also use SII. Specifications in the document and record, there are no restrictions regarding the device used, so the only thing that the invoice should contain the QR code and also the hash. In the case of the SII, there are no restrictions on the device used. Now, Albert, this is your turn. Albert, micro.
So just to summarize what we have said so far, and Eduardo has explained, we are going to have two different groups of taxpayers in Spain. We are going to have the ones that are currently under the SII, so companies that have a turnover exceeding 6 million euros, that are right now and in the past years submitting information according to the SII. In the end, what they are simply doing is transfer the VAT books, to say it in short. No copies of the invoices are being sent. Simply the main data of the invoices, sales and purchases, reported to the tax authorities website, SII. And starting next January, a new group of taxpayers that are under 6 million euros will fall on VeriFactu. There is a third group that may come up, because what the tax authorities are starting to say is that the new VeriFactu system applies to any company using a software for invoicing. What's going to happen, for example, in the case of a very, very small company, which is using a spreadsheet to issue its invoices, or even a company which is issuing invoices on a manual way, okay? So writing down the invoices by hand. What the tax authorities are saying is that in that case, that small company will not be using an invoicing software and will not under the VeriFactu obligations. So that right now we are foreseeing three groups of taxpayers. The big ones, more than 6 million euros, that are under the SII, which has been in place since 2017. The new group, which we call in the end VeriFactu, but to say it in a more accurate way, as I was saying, it should not be called VeriFactu, but the group of companies using invoicing softwares, okay, that needs to use registered, certified by the tax authorities software, and those companies that will be issuing invoices with this certified software will then, as you see it in this diagram, decide if they are going to be reporting those invoices immediately, that's what we call VeriFactu, or companies that will be issuing the invoices with a certified software, but not reporting them to the tax authorities website. That means that the companies would be responsible to keep a log, a file, okay, showing that the invoices have been correctly issued, but not sharing the information with the tax authorities. So in the end, the first question, and I go back to this diagram, should be to understand if my entity is included or not in the new regime for the invoicing software regulations. So the first question would be, is my subsidiary or my permanent establishment under 6 million euros turnover? Then I have a concern on the new obligations on invoicing software, because I will fall on those regulations, and I need to move in order to be compliant before the 1st January with those new obligations. If my company, if my entity is invoicing more than 6 million euros, I can simply forget about VeriFactu. I'm not in that game because I'm already reporting under the SII. But take care, because it's important. This is something dynamic. Dynamic means that the 6 million threshold may change from one year to the other. What the regulation says is that the 6 million threshold has to be observed in the preceding year. So any company that exceeds 6 million euros turnover in 2025 will fall on VeriFactu for 26. Or on the other hand, a company which was under SII since 2017 but has reduced its turnover in 2025, and in 2025 the company has a turnover under 5 million euros, then the company would be excluded from the SII and will fall in 2026 in the VeriFactu system. So take care about that, because it's not as simple as saying VeriFactu has nothing to see with me, or SII has nothing to see with me. It may change from one year to the other. So take care, look carefully at the turnover of permanent establishments or subsidiaries in 2025, because exceeding 6 million euros makes the change. Going back then to the diagram. So I have checked that I am under this new regulation for software invoicing. What's going to happen if I'm using my external ERP? I'm a multinational. I'm issuing my invoices using my US software, because the parent company is using the same software in all subsidiaries around the world. I'm from France, I'm from Germany, etc. In that case, it's strongly possible that my software is not certified by the tax authorities. So in that case, you need to find a certified software to issue those invoices. In that case, we will be talking about that later on. RSM is able to provide some guidance, some help on that. If, on the other hand, if my software is already checked by the tax authorities, because, I don't know, I'm using an ERP which has provided this certification, this may happen with, I don't know, SAP, NetSuite, Oracle, etc. So if my software is compliant with the new regulations, then what I'll need to do is to check if my invoices are correctly being issued under the new regulations. New invoices have to include a QR code and a hash. It's a very, very long series of numbers, allowing to control if the invoices remain unaltered and are consecutive with the preceding one. And that information should be printed in the invoices, in my PDF invoices or in my paper invoices if I'm printing them, and then would be recorded. And then the second question, okay, after checking that my invoices have the correct QR code and the hash in the invoice, decide if I'm going to be reporting to the tax authorities, that's VeriFactu, or deciding if I don't want to report that information to the tax authorities website. This is also important, because reporting that information means that after the issuance of the invoice, I have 60 seconds to connect to the tax authorities website and upload the main data of the invoice, the key data of the invoice. Then, after uploading the invoice, I will receive a reply from the tax authorities telling me if my invoice has been accepted. If my invoice has been accepted but contains some mistakes, errors that need to be corrected, or simply the invoice is rejected and not accepted by the tax authorities. And then I'm going to be checking what happened, etc. On the other hand, if I decide not to report my invoices, okay, I will be responsible within 4 years' time to keep a log file, okay, on my system that needs to be kept by the company just in case the tax authorities appears on an audit and ask me to show that my invoices have been correctly issued and contains all the information we've seen here, the QR code and the hash. So the company would be responsible of taking care that this log file is unaltered. It would be protected, etc. But the company needs to keep that file just in case the tax authorities were asking for it. So, summarizing the big decision of yes or no reporting the invoicing under VeriFactu, sending immediately the information gives some relief to companies, because as I have already reported everything, I don't need to keep any track, any file, etc. The tax authorities have all the information almost immediately. Or if I decide not to report, I am responsible to keep that information on my system within 4 years' time, just in case the tax authorities were asking for it. So also quite an important decision. But going back to the no, I don't have a certified software to issue my invoices. What shall I do? Please, Eduardo. In that case, RSM is offering 3 different options. The first one is the more, let's say, manual and focused on, let's say, small subsidiaries that have not a big volume of invoicing. One option would be sending the invoicing information to RSM, and at RSM will be taking care of issuing the invoices with a certified software, adding the QR code, etc., and according to the client decision, reporting it or not to the tax authority's website. Okay, so in that situation, RSM would be providing that service that would be issuing the invoices, okay, for the client, then sending the correctly issued invoices to the client and sending them to the final client, or ask RSM to be the outsourced service taking care of sending the invoices to the clients according to the information provided by our client. The second option, which is more an automated way, would be use an RSM Cloud VeriFactu solution. So in that situation, what RSM is offering is a cloud software where any client could connect, okay, with its single user or multi-user access, and then have a tool in our cloud system to use this personalized invoicing program, which is certified by the tax authorities, and manage the invoicing directly by its own, but using this RSM software that will always be updated and compliant with any regulations. And then the client would manage its own invoicing, but using an external tool. Okay, it would be like, you know, outsourcing, okay, the use of a program, but still taking care directly in the client the issuance of the invoices. And then thirdly, the last solution we are providing would be including the RSM VeriFactu solution as an API. So talking to your IT guys in the company, and then implementing our VeriFactu system over your ERP. So our VeriFactu solution will connect to your ERP, and your ERP would be feeding the RSM VeriFactu solution. So sending to the RSM VeriFactu solution all the information to issue the invoices, and then those invoices would be issued correctly in an automated way. RSM will only be a software provider in that case, okay? So providing that API that would be installed on the client software on premises. So 3 options, as you can see. The more manual one, we are doing the invoicing for you. We are sending the invoices to whoever you may decide, okay? So our team, it's more manual, okay? We have also digitalization and automated solution, but this means that we'll be taking care of the full process. Secondly, letting you in doing the invoicing, but using our cloud solution. And then thirdly, the more sophisticated way, okay, implementing the software over as a new layer on your software, okay, so making it part of your ERP. Just to decide, and as I was saying, feel free to contact us if you think that you may need such kind of solution in your company. Eduardo? What about VeriFactu? What about this QR code we are talking about? This is a kind of template of how those new invoices will look like in Spain starting on 1st of January. So all invoices would include necessarily this QR code and this hash code that gives some proof that all the invoicing is correlative, etc. Why we are adding a QR code? As you can see here, the new invoices are including the QR code. So we need to review our invoicing templates because we need to include this QR code. And this QR code can be used in a very, let's say, funny way. The QR code means that the receiver of the invoice, our client, okay, using its mobile phone, there's going to be an app issued by the tax authorities. Using its mobile phone may take a picture of the QR code, and then the QR code would tell him if that invoice has already been reported to the tax authorities, VeriFactu. Okay, so what the tax authorities would say is, green light, I know that invoice because that invoice has already been reported to my website, and here is the main data of the invoice, taxable base, output VAT, etc., just to check that this invoice matches to the invoice reported to the tax authorities, so a proof of no alteration, manipulation has been made. But in the case of VeriFactu, okay, it's also going to be funny because when you are going to be taking the picture of the invoice, of the QR code, if you receive a red light, this means that the tax authorities would be replying, this invoice has not been reported to the tax authorities, which is also an option because, as we have said, no VeriFactu means no reporting. So the person or the company issuing the invoice has not reported it, but thank you for the data you are submitting, because the tax authorities would store all that information, and if the time comes and they decide to do so, they may address the issuer of the invoice just to check that all the QR codes they have received are also included in the log file I was talking some minutes ago. So, two ways of getting the information. On a voluntary way, VeriFactu, the person, the entity issuing the invoice is reporting to the tax authorities, or second way for the tax authorities of getting that kind of information, that would be having the taxpayers acting as small auditors, taking pictures of the invoices, reporting them to the tax authorities, and the tax authorities getting that information of entities that are not reporting VeriFactu, but have clients that are checking the invoices, the integrity of the invoices, using their mobile phone. Remember that everything we are talking about is only for small and medium companies. So as you can imagine, we are talking about small companies that have not very big resources to implement such changes, etc. And it's going to be a learning curve in the next few months to see how companies will adapt to those new regulations, deciding if they're going to be under VeriFactu or not, how they're going to be showing the QR code in their invoices, what's going to happen with the such an immediate reporting. Okay, so 60 seconds to report the invoice, which is very short time to do so, and that's something that a lot of small and medium companies are thinking about, or even multinational companies that have subsidiaries or permanent establishments in Spain that are really trying to find a way to be compliant with those new regulations. Eduardo? Then, the operational scheme for the invoicing process, how we are going to be managing that. If the client is wishing to issue the invoices, no problem for that, but you're going to need to check if your invoicing software is certified, and if the invoices that you're going to be issuing starting on the 1st January are including all the necessary information, mainly the QR code and the hash. And then also deciding if that information is going to be submitted or not to the Spanish tax authorities website within 60 seconds after the issuance of the invoice, right? Regarding the accountancy, no changes at all. It's simply a very small change. It's a change focusing on the software we use to issue the invoices, and the addition of this QR code and the hash code that's going to be generated by certified softwares. As I was saying before, in case that your company is using manual procedures to issue their invoices, using I don't know, Word, Excel, or any other program, which is not itself an invoicing software. Okay, so we are talking about a word processor, a spreadsheet, etc. Those entities, in principle, would not fall under VeriFactu, And of course, as we are talking about very small companies, no SLAI would be applicable either. Regarding the RSM solution that we have described, it's going to be up to the client. First option, second option, third option. First option, we are doing everything for the client. We are issuing the invoices on its behalf. We can send them to the client, or even send the copies of the invoices already issued with the QR code to the client, having the client sending the invoices by itself. Or as an alternative, right, using the cloud software that can be used by the client, no intervention. Here in the case of RSM, the client manages everything, or if the client is not wishing to use our cloud solution, asking our consultants to implement the RSM invoicing software over their ERP. This is many different options you have, okay, or at least the options that RSM is providing in that sense. The last point that Eduardo also said is regarding what I was saying at the time of the introduction. At the time of the introduction, I was talking about the SII, I was talking about VeriFactu, and the different options a company may have. I'm saying so because Eduardo pointed out, if a company which is under 6 million euros, right, is not wishing to implement VeriFactu, the certified software, changing the invoicing templates, etc., such kind of companies have quite an easy way, okay, to avoid VeriFactu. And the easy way to avoid VeriFactu would be to apply voluntarily to the SII. So if those companies, before the end of December, take care of that, before the end of December, applies in the tax authority's website to be included in the SII, because they want to report every 4 days the information under the SII, if they are in the SII, they will escape from VeriFactu. So no costs purchasing new software, adapting softwares, paying licenses, adding the QR code, reporting every 60 seconds, right? But the option is to go to the SII. That means reporting sales and purchases every 4 days. The advantage we have, and this is our opinion as tax advisors here at RSM, is that in the case of the SII has been in place since 2017. So we do all have quite a lot of experience on such kind of reporting. And what I'm saying, we do all, means that the tax authorities have experience, our clients have experience, and we as RSM have experience on such kind of reporting that can be done in quite an easy way every 4 days, sales and purchases. And it's as simple as, for example, in the case of the clients that are asking us to manage such reporting on their behalf, sending us a spreadsheet, an Excel file, a template we are providing with the VAT books. And then we take care of everything, we report under the SII, etc. And the client would be forgetting about VeriFactu. The other option, I want to stay out of the SII, so the client has to manage the implementation of VeriFactu. That means paying for an updated program by a cloud solution, implementing an API over its ERP, adapting their invoicing templates, and of course, going into a learning curve. And when I'm talking about the learning curve, what I'm referring to is that everything is going to be new starting on 1st of January. So reporting is going to be new. There's going to be mistakes when reporting, receiving error messages from the tax authorities if we are reporting under VeriFactu. If we are not reporting on the VeriFactu, and I'm keeping that log file, that would be a closed box where I don't really know if I'm really issuing the invoices the correct way. So what's going to happen if one day the tax authorities are coming, and as months are going to be passing, everything will learn from this new system, but it's going to be a learning curve, some months, okay, to get adapted to this new system. And as soon as the system starts to be used by companies, we are going to be adjustments, changes. The tax authorities would start with small changes on the invoicing obligations on the VeriFactu. That means new updates of my software, etc. And I'm saying so because this is something we have suffered in the past. Okay, so when SII has started back in 2017, this is what happened. Okay, we started one day, was around middle 2017 with SII, and we started reporting. There were mistakes, right? Checking what's happening, why this invoice is not being accepted, what's happening, I don't know, with any kind of information in the invoice. It was a little bit of a nightmare. And this is something we expect to see when VeriFactu starts, especially taking into account that we are going to be dealing with very small taxpayers that have not enough resources to manage such situations. So in addition, and summarizing what I've said, a good way of skipping the VeriFactu obligations could be, okay, going in a voluntary way to the SII, assuming that there's going to be a cost of this reporting every 4 days for sales and purchases. But this is how things are, and this is something that we have to decide and to manage. Also keep in mind, and that's the last point to be covered, the potential new changes coming up in 2 years' time or 3 years' time regarding electronic invoicing. Companies that would implement VeriFactu are going to be making an effort, including the QR code, new software, etc. But if in 2 years' time the electronic invoicing appears, and this is what we are seeing from the tax authorities' message, that in 2-3 years' time electronic invoices would be implemented, then once again the taxpayers that have already implemented VeriFactu are going to need to do some additional changes to be compliant with electronic invoicing. So as you can see, a very amazing future in the next few months, few years regarding importing obligation, invoicing obligations in Spain that affect many companies, and also remembering the dynamic vision. Okay, so dynamic vision means that depending on your turnover, you can move from one system to the other, changing any other software you may have or templates on your invoices, etc. That's all for my part. Just remembering again, Eduardo, that your key contacts at RSM Spain that are ready to serve you, depending on the city you may prefer to refer, are Jaime López, Sergio García in Barcelona, myself also in Barcelona, Pepe Oltra, Raúl Marcetti in Valencia. Then we have David Jiménez, Igor Martín, and Vicente Durán in Madrid, José Antonio Romero Seville, and Eduardo and Javier Betancourt in the Canary Islands. Remember that the new invoicing obligations are affecting entities that are located in the peninsula, so in the Spanish territory for VAT, but also in the Canary Islands, where they have a special and direct tax, okay, called IGIC, Impuesto Indirecto Canario, a kind of VAT that will also fall on those obligations regarding VeriFactu. Then to finalize, Eduardo will be doing a quick check on the most asked questions regarding via VeriFactu that may help also answering any doubt or question you may have. Eduardo, please.
Thank you, Albert. Okay, now we're going to see these frequent asked questions that the tax authorities has published in the website. So we have selected the more relevant ones from our point of view. Well, it says, I belong to a group that in principle is not obliged to issue invoices. Will the regulation that determines the requirements for electronic invoicing system affect me? No. The point here is that as long as you are not obliged to issue invoices, you are not obliged to comply with the requirements foreseen in the law. I'm a natural person who rents a housing and business premises. Do I need to adapt the regulation? Here, the point is to determine whether this individual is carrying out the rental activity as a business activity, or whether this activity or this income should be qualified from a tax viewpoint as a business activity, as a business income, or as a immovable property income. If the person does not carry out the business activity, the rental activity as a business activity, this person is not obliged to follow the rules of the Royal Decree and should not be in compliance with these new regulations regarding the electronic invoice system. On the other hand, if this person is carrying out the rental activity as a business activity from a tax viewpoint, in this case, this person should meet the requirements foreseen in the new laws. Applying the farming, cattle, breeding, and fisheries system for VAT. This regulation affects you? The answer will be no, because this type of persons are not obliged to issue invoices. However, if for any reason they on a voluntary basis, they issue invoices, they will need to meet the requirements. Oops. As Albert has said now, this regulation not only affects to the Spanish mainland, but also Canary Islands and Ceuta and Melilla, that we have a different and direct taxation system, very close to VAT, but different. But as Albert has said, this applies to the whole territory, the Spanish territory, with an exception that we will see now. I only perform transactions with a surcharge equivalent to VAT. Will the regulation affect me? The answer will be no, as long as this type of persons are not obliged to issue invoices. I issue all my invoices manually. Will electronic invoicing system regulation affect me? Well, as Albert has said, or I think he said, if you are issuing invoice manually, this regulation will not affect you, because the fact here is that this regulation affects to the persons that use a software to issue invoices. So as long as you don't use an electronic invoicing system, you will not fall under the scope of this regulation. If I use spreadsheets, Excel numbers, or text processors as Word, Pages, will electronic invoicing system regulation affect me? Well, here's the tricky one, because in principle, if you're using, let's say, a Word or an Excel, and that's it, in principle, that should be considered as a manual invoicing, as a not automatic, not electronic invoicing. But if for any reason your Excel have a programming macro, in that case, that should be considered as a electronic invoicing system, and then you will be subject to this new regulation. So here it's important to see in detail what you are doing with your invoices and what the Excel or other software that you may use are using with the data that they get from your invoices, in order to know or to determine whether you are in a manual invoicing situation or an automatic invoicing situation, electronic. Which regulation must apply to entrepreneurs who are subject to taxation by the local treasuries, in this case of the Basque Country? So the question here is, are the taxpayers that are resident in the Basque Country need to comply with this regulation? The short answer is no, because in the Basque Country they have already this some regulation very similar to the Spanish this new regulation that has been enacted in Spain, the so-called ticket buy. So as long as these companies are issuing invoices and they are resident in the Basque Country, they don't need to comply with this regulation, as they are already complying, or they are subject or under the scope of this ticket buy regulation applicable in the Basque Country. When the invoice is physically issued by the recipient of the transaction, self-invoicing, who creates the registered invoicing record to comply with the electronic invoicing system regulation? In this case, the answer will be the recipient. The recipient is the one that have to create the registered invoicing record to comply with the electronic invoicing system. In fact, if the recipient is the one that is in the SII, this regulation will not apply to those invoices. However, or notwithstanding the foregoing, the point is that regardless of the fact that this recipient issuing the invoices in behalf of the supplier of the goods or the renderer of the services, this renderer of services or the supplier will be kept liable for any breach in the comply of the regulation. So if for any reason a penalty we apply, you will be liable regardless of the fact that it's the recipient, the one that is issuing the invoices. What sanctions are included in the Spanish tax law regarding certain computer or electronic systems that do not meet with the stipulated requirements? Well, this is foreseen in the Spanish General Tax Act. It is here: manufacturing, selling, or producing systems that are not in compliance with the law, a fine of 150,000 euros for each year and for each type of system involved. Selling systems without a mandatory certification, a fine of 1,000 euros for each system not certified, and having systems that are not in compliance, not certified, or manipulated, a fine of 50,000 euros per year that they are used. Which commercial documents are subject to the regulation that determines the requirements for the electronic invoicing system and how they are affected? Well, this regulation does not affect to any other document that is not considered an invoice. Thus, does not apply to delivery notes or receipts. So this regulation only applies for invoices. Can a pre-invoicing pro forma invoice or draft system be implemented before issuing recording an invoice? Yes, I mean, from a Spanish legal perspective, pro forma invoices or draft invoices are permitted, so they are not illegal. If for any reason you want to use the pro formas, the system for pro forma should be linked with the invoices system that you are using. So that should allow the system to link one pro forma to the final invoice that it will be issued. So if this is not, if the system does not comply with this feature of linking pro forma and invoices, you may face penalties. A shop issues in simplified invoices and at the end of the day obtains a summarized invoice of all accounts. What should be done with these simplified invoices? Well, the regulation applies not only to regular invoices, but also to simplified invoices. So they should be covered and should comply with these regulations. The point here is that this summarized invoices can be considered an invoice for management purposes. So these summarized invoices does not, in principle, be under the scope of regulation because already those simplified invoices have been already issued, storage, or delivered to tax authorities throughout the futures that the new regulation foresees. If an invoice is issued by mistake and registered file is created and record or sent to the VeriFactu system, a new registered record must be created with the opposite sign for its cancellation. And afterwards, a new registered record must be created with the correct invoice. In these cases, must the canceled invoice be reported in the cancellation record? Yes. I mean, all the cancellations, for that reason, all these systems have what the so-called events. So it would the system need to be able to provide to tax authorities a traceability of all invoices issued. So In this case, as the answer says, several cases of error may occur with various possible solutions: cancellation, corrective invoices. All these different type of invoices should be included in the system and of course delivered, sent to tax authorities in case if you have opted for the VeriFactu. What advantages does this new regulation? Well, in principle, reduce tax evasion, it decreases unfair competition, modernize and digitalize business systems, enables the recipient of invoices to easily send data to tax authorities. It reduces bureaucratic burden since fewer requests from tax authorities in principle should be received, and it promotes a fairer, more efficient and digitalized economy. What is a VeriFactu system and how does it differ from a non-verified invoice issuing system? Well, the key difference is that the VeriFactu electronic invoices, all the billing records corresponding to the invoices issued are sent online and almost automatically to tax authorities. As it says here, on a continuous, secure, correct, integral, automatic, consecutive, immediate, and reliable manner. Whereas a non-verifiable invoice issuing system does not send them, but instead stores them, being obliged to guarantee the integrity, storage, accessibility, legibility, and traceability, and inalienability of the record. It is possible to switch from the VeriFactu system to a non-verifiable invoice issuing system and vice versa. The answer will be yes. A company can apply a VeriFactu in any moment. But once the system is used, it must continue to be applied until the end of the calendar year. If a non-verifiable invoice issuing system is being used at the beginning of the year, it is possible to switch to VeriFactu at any time. A company has two cost centers, one central and one at the different location, which are not connected to each other. Can one of the systems be used? Can one of the systems used be VeriFactu and the other one no? The answer is yes. One system can be connected and be VeriFactu and the other one not. But the point is that will create some sort of discrepancies at the level of tax authorities that for sure will generate a lot of tax communication to the taxpayers in order to figure out what is happening. Will tax authorities provide a book in business? In principle, yes. Tax authorities plan to implement a service that will allow all records of invoices issued by the taxpayer to be downloaded and reported throughout VeriFactu. That has been uploaded and reported throughout VeriFactu. So the facility to download the records issued by the suppliers of the same taxpayers is also planned, as long as they have also been reported throughout the VeriFactu. This is something that they are planning to do, but let's see when they are able to provide us with that service. And I think that this is the end. Well, I would like to thank you all for sitting here to this webinar. As Albert has said, we are open to talk to you, to answer any questions you may have, and thank you very much for your assistance.
Okay, so thank you so much, Eduardo. I think that we only have a question, okay? Someone asking what's going to happen with a non-established entity in Spain, which is registered and taxable in the UK and are only registered for VAT purposes. As we have said, and I know it's a little bit strange, okay? But what VeriFactu says is that in order to check if you're affected by VeriFactu, you have to be a corporate income tax payer in Spain. So if you are what we call a non-established entity in Spain, which is invoicing with Spanish VAT, to say it in short, okay, if your tax ID in Spain starts with letter N, that means non-established, you are not affected by VeriFactu. The only way to be affected by VeriFactu is being a Spanish entity, limited liability company, sociedad anónima, etc., or having a branch or a permanent establishment. So a branch and a permanent establishment has a tax ID starting with the letter W. So if your tax ID is starting with letter W, or you are a legal entity in Spain, you're affected by VeriFactu. If you are a non-established entity in Spain, so you're not paying corporate income tax, you are simply declaring VAT, you are not affected by new invoicing regulations. I know that this may seem a little bit nonsense, okay, because we are focusing on a direct tax to understand if this is affecting our indirect taxation, which is VAT. But this is how the measure has been approved by the Spanish government. So in that case, Oliver, no affection for you. Well, thank you so much, you all, for attending this webinar. Thank you, Eduardo, for your cooperation. And I may finalize with four important points. Okay, so keep in mind that you have to check which is your turnover in 2025, because depending on your turnover, you're going to be affected, okay, by VeriFactu or by the SII, and that makes a difference. Second point, if you are under VeriFactu, because you are in 2025 under 6 million euros, you have to decide if you want to skip VeriFactu going voluntarily into the SII. So there's a decision to be made. That's an easy way to skip VeriFactu, but the decision has to be taken before the end of the calendar year. Then, if you decide to go to VeriFactu, third point we covered, check if your software is adapted, is a certified software by the Spanish tax authorities. If your software is certified, no problem. If your software is not certified, try to find a new invoicing software compliant with the tax authorities, or refer to us in order to find a solution together with RSM. And then the last four point here is to decide if your VeriFactu reporting is going to be under immediate reporting of information, 60-second and VeriFactu, or decide if you're going to be under the no VeriFactu. That means not reporting at all any information, but keeping the log file in your systems within 4 years if the tax, just in case the tax authorities were asking for it. In short, thank you so much for your attendance. You have our emails, our points of contact. Send us an email, give us a call if you need further information, and have a great afternoon. Thank you all.